Hello and welcome to Matrix Live. My guest today is Josh Simmons. You might have heard of him, the managing director of the Matrix.org Foundation. We recently announced the first elections of the governing board of the Matrix Foundation. We have a blog post written by Josh, very well written, covering in depth what is the governing board, what to expect and what not to expect from it. And I'm going to send a link to that in the description. As a quick reminder, before we dive in, the governing board is a set of elected people representing the Matrix ecosystem and foundation members, and its mission will be to steer the foundation in the best interest of everyone, basically. Josh, hello, welcome. First question, can you tell us who can run for the board?
Yes, absolutely. So first I'll say the purpose of the governing board is to bring in stakeholders from across the ecosystem to help guide the foundation in Matrix. And so because that is the purpose of the governing board, we have a governing board that is going to be quite large and has many different types of stakeholders who will be seated on it. So the way that I think about the governing board is there are at a high level, 3 different groupings. We have community representatives. So of those community representatives, we have individual members. So that's individuals who support the foundation. And up to 4 individual members will have a seat on the governing board. We also have ecosystem members. Ecosystem members are projects and communities that are built on Matrix or around Matrix. So for instance, you look at clients or servers, those are eligible, for instance, to be ecosystem members. And we have seats for 3 ecosystem members on that board. Lastly, in the community representative category, we have associate members. And those associate members are nonprofits, or other organizations that are not for profit that share our values. So associate members might be other open source foundations like GNOME or KDE or Eclipse. Associate members might also be, for instance, universities who happen to use Matrix. And associate members have 2 seats on the governing board. So just to recap that, among the community representatives, we have 3 different types of members. We have individual members who have 4 seats, ecosystem members who have 3 seats, and associate members who have 2 seats. Okay, so that's the community side of representation on the governing board. Then we have the funder representatives. And the funder representatives are representatives of the organizations who sponsor, basically, the Matrix.org Foundation. So we have different sponsor tiers. We have platinum, gold, and silver. And there's a similar repeating pattern here where we have seats for 4 platinum members on the board, 3 gold members on the board, and 2 silver members. So that is our community representatives and our funder representatives. Lastly, we have foundation representatives on the governing board.
Just before we move on, I'm not sure, how many platinum members do we have?
That's a great clarifying
representative, I mean, because I'm not sure, maybe I misunderstood. 2 platinum?
So we have, on the governing board, we've allocated seats for up to 4 platinum members.
Oh, right, and 2 silver at the end. Yeah, sorry.
That's exactly right.
Carry on, sorry.
So we've got the community representatives, we've got the funder representatives, and lastly, we have the foundation representatives. And we make up the smallest portion of that board because, of course, the goal is to get external representation. So we have 3 guardians who will be on the governing board, 2 spec core team members, and then yours truly in an ex officio capacity will also be on the governing board. So all told, we have a governing board that may be up to 24 people. We how many actually get seated depends on how many people choose to nominate themselves and how the elections go. But we expect to have a pretty full contingent when we first seat the governing board of community, funder, and foundation representatives.
All right, so 24 board members is quite a large board. We're going to touch on the logistics around that and what to expect if you run for the board a bit later. But first, what is the timeline? When do I need to apply and when can we vote?
Right. So the time to apply, if you are interested in being a candidate in the election for the governing board, the time to apply is basically now. The nomination period opens this Saturday, April 20th, and it will run for 1 week to the end of day Friday, April 26th. So the time, if you want to run in the election, to nominate yourself is imminent. And then after we have our 1 week nomination period, we have a period of campaigning, right? An opportunity for people to get to know the candidates, for people to ask the candidates questions. And then come 1 month from the day we're recording this, on May 18th, is when the actual voting period begins. And then that's roughly a 2-week period. We will announce the results of the elections on June 3rd.
All right, so it's going to be quite a large board. The deadline are not that tight, but you need to get ready if you want to apply. How about the expectations? Is it are the board members going to meet every other week and with a lot of work to do, or is it a board more an oversight type of board where you can give your opinion and give a general direction?
Right. So the governing board as a whole, because it is so large and coordinating schedules is a whole thing, the governing board will meet at least twice a year. So my best guess, they'll probably meet in August of this year, and then they'll probably meet in March of next year, something along those lines. The governing board has some pretty significant responsibilities. So they need to review and approve the foundation's annual budget. They need to approve, they need to review and approve any significant contracts that the foundation engages in. So for instance, the foundation can't spend a ton of money on something without the governing board's approval. That threshold, by the way, is $50,000 is where that is set. And then the governing board also has a role in approving major initiatives and programs that would, for instance, change the brand or reputation of the foundation or create a new revenue stream. So we cannot make any significant strategic changes without buy-in and approval from the governing board. And then the next couple of things that the governing board is expected to do is provide input to the spec core team about prioritizing, what needs to happen in this spec, right? For all of the spec changes that we want as an ecosystem, we have a finite number of people to manage those and drive those forward. And so the governing board provides a sense of prioritization for the spec core team. And then very, very last in the set of responsibilities, the governing board can provide recommendations and guidance on next steps in general to the guardians and the staff of the foundation. So I want to point out that those are pretty significant responsibilities, and there's no world in which those things can happen in only 2 meetings, right? And so our expectation is that while the governing board will meet as a full board at least twice a year per the bylaws, we will also have some committees of the governing board. We might have a finance committee. We might have a governance committee and they can do the work in a smaller group setting of reviewing the material, providing feedback, iterating on it with staff, and then ultimately, once that committee has a recommendation, they can make that recommendation to the whole of the governing board.
All right.
So,
Yes.
So governing board, at least 2 meetings a year, plus some committee meetings for whatever committees that an individual member might sign up for. And then the expectation is there will probably be some communication in between meetings, right? And then preparation for meetings. So it is definitely, for those who are familiar with the distinction between a advisory board or a working board, this is definitely on the advisory board side of the equation. We're not expecting our governing board members to be, putting in a lot of hours on this. They have an important role, but they're not staff, right? They're not supposed to be spending a ton of time pushing these things forward necessarily.
Right. So in terms of board maturity, you pointed out the committee, which is clearly a sign of maturity when you have a board which is capable of organizing in committees to do the bulk of the work, and then have the biannual meeting to meet and just take decisions, not try to do the bulk of the work during the very scarce meetings you have, because time is very scarce for everyone. With that said, being part of the advisory board is not the only way to get involved in the foundation. Obviously, we are still going to work on the working groups, so we are running a tiny bit late for the first one we want to run, but this is still going to happen. You don't necessarily need to run for the board if what you are interested in is getting very hands-on in the operations of the foundation. The role of the advisor, or the role of the board, of the governing board, is more advisory, so more of a strategic vision oversight. All right, sounds like me. So I'm in. How can I apply or vouch for someone else? Because you said nominate, and not just nominate yourself, but also nominate others.
That's right. So we have that nomination period that opens in just a couple of days from time of recording. There will be we will be posting to our blog and our social channels, and of course the office of the foundation and other key rooms to let people know that the nomination period has opened. There will be a form for people to fill out in order to nominate themselves or somebody else. For somebody to, if you want to nominate somebody else, that person has to have already consented to being nominated, right? We're not looking to, let's just say, the logistics of elections and running a governing board, already quite a lot for the small team that we are. And so we ask that anybody who's nominated has already agreed to doing that, so that we don't then have to spend a lot of time chasing folks down saying like, hey, so-and-so nominated you. Are you willing to do this? So that needs to happen before somebody is nominated. And what we're going to be asking folks to do in the process of nominating themselves or somebody else is to provide a little bit of information. So first of all, confirm that they are eligible to be nominated. Tell us, basic contact information. You share your name. And by the way, we are accepting of pseudonymity on the governing board. So we're not asking people to necessarily use what you might call as like your full legal name or like your government assigned name. We appreciate that not everybody can do that. There are some barriers, particularly for folks from underrepresented identities, marginalized groups, who cannot safely use their sort of government-issued name. So we will ask people in the nomination process to, what is their name? Tell us a little bit about your background, and write a brief statement about what you want to do and why you want to run and what you want to do on the governing board. And the idea is that at the end of the nomination period, we'll be standing up a landing page on the matrix.org website for the elections that includes a listing of all of the candidates and their bios and the statements that they've shared. So that means that everybody will have a view into who is running for the governing board. And that means later you can have conversations with these folks and get a sense of who you want to vote for.
All right, so to get the global overview, it's going to be on matrix.org on a dedicated webpage.
That's right.
Right, but the voting itself, because matrix.org is a static website, so without diving too much into the technicalities of it, but basically it's a static page, it's not interactive, and voting is quite interactive. How do we vote?
Yes, so we are using, this year, we are using an election tool called OPA Vote. That's OPA Vote. And basically, we're using that system to run each of the elections. By the way, I should specify that for each of those groups we talked about earlier, each one has its own election. So if you're an individual member, you are voting on other individual members. If you're an ecosystem member, you're voting on other ecosystem members. And so what will happen, basically, is if you are an individual member, for instance, you will receive an email that will invite you to vote on the candidates who have nominated themselves for that election. And then at the end of the election period, the election will close. OPA Vote tallies using the we're using a Condorcet method for voting and instant runoff for tie-breaking situations. And so once the election closed, everybody in that election will get an email with the results. And then a few days later, we post the results of all of the elections on the website.
All right. And then people who won the election are going to get a lot of reading to do to get onboarded, and they will get to meet each other for the first meeting of the board. Do we have a date yet for the first meeting of the board?
We don't have a date yet, but my expectation is it will probably be in August, perhaps in September, but it will definitely be on this side of the new year. The idea being that we want to have some time for the elected members to go through a lightweight onboarding process. Everyone who gets elected will have we'll get some one-on-one time with me as part of that onboarding process, and just recognizing that we might have up to 24 members, or 23 if you exclude me. That's a lot of onboarding meetings. So we want to give ourselves a little bit of time to do that work before convening the whole governing board. Now, that said, the governing board will have a mailing list and a room on Matrix that they can communicate with. So even before we do a full formal meeting of the governing board will have an opportunity to begin communicating with amongst themselves.
All right. Is there anything else people should know before the election?
Yeah, I would say, there are two details that I think are salient for me. First of all, the governing board is primarily about increasing open governance for Matrix and the Foundation. But it has a secondary purpose as well. And that purpose is to serve as social infrastructure, right? We want to ultimately see more communication and collaboration across the ecosystem. We want to see projects and communities interacting with each other more so that we can understand each other's needs. We can deduplicate some of our work. We can maybe come up with new ideas together that we wouldn't have come up with on our own. And so I'm very excited to see how the social dynamics around the ecosystem evolve as we elect this governing board. The other thing that I think is important to flag is the first election is always a little bit weird. Right, we're all learning new mechanisms. We're building new implementing systems. We're doing the work of establishing who is eligible to vote and nominate in the first place. There's what our bylaws say, and then there's the actual work for us as staff members to implement that. And then the work for the greater ecosystem to engage and understand what is going on. So I want to set everybody's expectations to know that this is novel for us, and it's okay to ask questions. It's okay and encouraged to provide feedback, because we're not going to get everything right. We're going to do our very best, but this is a complicated evolution for the ecosystem, and frankly, it's a complicated project. I cannot overstate how much effort goes into just building voter rolls. Oh my goodness. So please be vocal in this process, and let's do this together with a spirit of collaboration and experimentation, and know that we're going to do this. We're going to get this started, and we're going to do it even better next year.
All right. Thank you very much for all the insights about the board. I'm really curious to see who is going to run for the board. I can't wait to see who are going to be the candidates, how many of them we are going to have. And I'm even more curious to see who is going to be elected. So with that said, all the material is going to be linked to in the description or posted on the matrix.org website. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week, Matrix Live. See you around.